A while back, I predicted that Shin Megami Tensei 5 would be the best, would have its best-selling version on Nintendo Switch. This was perfectly reasonable to assume because the game launched as a Nintendo Switch exclusive in 2021 or 2020. Like, it's been several years since the release of the base game. It has a dedicated Nintendo audience. Shin Megami Tensei has been a Nintendo exclusive for a long time. The Switch is the best platform anyway. To me, it was very obvious that Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance would sell best on Nintendo Switch. And lo and behold, it did, right? In spite of all the shilling, in spite of all the complaints, in spite of all the whining about how, like, the real Shin Megami Tensei audience was on other platforms, other platforms that have never gotten a Shin Megami Tensei game to this point. In spite of all of those complaints, SMT5 has sold the best on Nintendo Switch, and that is very glad makes me very happy to see. That's very, very exciting because it really demonstrates like the reality behind like the third party like coping and seething, because you're consistently seeing Sega, the company that owns SMT now, like you're seeing them cry and like bitch and complain like, oh no, we can't put Yakuza on Nintendo platforms. We can't put our games on Nintendo platforms. But immediately, once they have a prominent Nintendo IP, the first thing they do is make it multi-plat. This is going to be, I think, the trend with Square Enix as well, where, like, games that launch as Nintendo exclusives, stuff like Live Alive, stuff like Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, like, they're going to get ported to other platforms immediately, even though there's no real demand or interest in them on other platforms. But no, they will never, ever port the real games to Nintendo consoles. No Monster Hunter World, no Final Fantasy 16, no Final Fantasy 15. Like, we still haven't even gotten Final Fantasy 14 or 13. Like, again, the most recent mainline Final Fantasy game we've gotten is 12. Like, isn't that insane? You're delusional if you think Final Fantasy 13 can't run on Switch. And yet, somehow, we haven't gotten anything more recent than the PS2. Again, companies are desperate to try and keep people disengaged with Nintendo properties. They want to keep up the illusion that the real games are on other platforms, and they're resorting to very weird, underhanded tricks to do it. Case in point, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, a couple of months after launch. Actually, no, it launched last month in August. Yeah, in June. Yeah, it launched last month in June. Like June 25th or something. It didn't do well on other platforms. It sold reasonably well on Switch. What does Atlus do? They give a sale on every other platform except for Switch. But let's think about that for a minute. In order to prop up the sales numbers for Xbox, PlayStation, and PC, Atlus puts the game on sale to try to get the numbers up to be more competitive with the full price Switch version. They are deliberately trying to steer people to their preferred platforms. Like, even slashing the price isn't really going to do like much for them, because like most people who are interested in Shin Megami Tensei 5 have already bought it, right? Like, there isn't going to be some renewed interest in SMT5 because, like, oh, it's on sale now. Like, the reason for this, like, I think, is to prop up sales numbers and create the illusion that there's more of an audience for SMT players on non-Nintendo platforms than there actually are. That SMT5 sold more than it did in general, because that's been the trend lately, hasn't it? To straight up lie about sales numbers. This hasn't been something I've been talking about a lot, but like, yeah, like Horizon Zero Dawn supposedly sold 20 million units. Allegedly about as much as Breath of the Wild did, right? But while Breath of the Wild has gone on to be like this huge success story, got a highly successful sequel, has become like a video game icon, like Horizon Zero Dawn has completely fallen off. And the reason for that is that like Horizon Zero Dawn's success was entirely AstroTurf, right? They gave the game away. They included it in bundles, right? It was on sale regularly. They were giving it away on like PS Plus, right? Like, they were doing all this stuff to try and get those numbers up, to create the illusion that Horizon Zero Dawn was competitive with Zelda. And like it obviously wasn't true. Plenty of people saw through it. And in a lot of ways, like Horizon has kind of become this generation's knack. Because like it had the same like weird momentum behind it. Where like everybody was crying about how Aloy is the greatest character ever. Oh, like robot dinosaurs in a post-apocalyptic setting. This is so unique and creative. Like people tried hyping up the game as something special and unique when in reality it was just a really mid, uninspired, boring product, right? Like there was nothing there about in regards to the Horizon. Like seeing seeing companies like this like pull these stunts all the time, making all these wild claims like, oh, Terraria has outperformed Super Mario Bros. It has sold more than the most iconic video games ever made. Yeah. Because Super Mario Bros. Has had a lot of different versions outside of the original NES release, right? You know, you can play it for free on Nintendo Switch Online right now. People don't need to buy Super Mario Bros. In order to play it, right? Like again, and it's not like Terraria is ever going to be followed up with a sequel that's as successful, right? Like it just isn't going to happen. Like again, you keep seeing these people make these wild like claims, like, "Oh, Baldur's Gate 3 sold tens of millions of units." No, it didn't. Like, Elden Ring outperformed Tears of the Kingdom. No, it didn't. Like, you see these people make these wild claims that simply have no basis in reality, right? You see them make these. If Power World is bigger than Pokemon, like you see them doing all this like stuff pulling all these stunts, hyping up the sales numbers for games, but it's all fake, right? You know, I remember what it was like growing up in like the Metroid Prime versus Halo debacle, right? Where everyone was crying about like, oh, Halo is obviously better. It has books that I don't read. It has online play. It has multiplayer. Like it has a masculine hero. Like people threw every excuse at the book, right, to try and justify like Halo being considered better than Metroid Prime. It obviously wasn't even then. You know, this is like my earliest memory of like online gaming discourse is like realizing that like playing Halo at like people's houses and realizing like wow this series really isn't that good. Like even back in the series heyday, like Halo 1. Combat Evolved, right? Playing this game and just being like, this isn't very good, right? Like, I remember that happening. And what happened over the next couple of decades? Halo slowly started decaying, right? People were done with it by Halo 3, but like Bungie kept putting out sequels, ODST, Reach, and then they left, and now we're like dealing with the 343 era, and they have no idea what they're doing, right? The IP is essentially dead. And yet, Metroid is still going strong, right? Metroid has been innovating with like new Prime games and new takes on the formula, new 2D games. Like Metroid is like in a lot of ways more popular than ever, while Halo has fallen off, right? To me, this is a very strong indication of what every video game IP is essentially going to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now. Especially something like FromSlot, but like I think everything that people are putting up against Nintendo right now is like of the same ilk as Halo back in the 2000s. Things that are popular for very superficial reasons that will have no staying power and are only talked about for in order to like keep the discussion away from Nintendo, right? Like, and again, like SMT5, really interesting example. Like when this game was a Nintendo exclusive, like you saw people come out and try to say this is the worst SMT game ever. They completely dropped the ball on the plot and the story and the themes and the ideas. Like this is a terrible video game, blah blah blah. And now that it's multi-plat, suddenly all of those excuses have gone away. Interesting, isn't it? How that happens. And this isn't like the only example, but it is like really interesting to see companies bend over backwards, do everything they possibly can to keep their games from becoming successful on Nintendo hardware.